I had this idea about 3 years ago of releasing a collection of chairs. I had made a few over the years, but mostly I had avoided them because of inexperience, the time it takes to create, and the inevitable price point. The dining chair is elusive because it's hard to make. It does take a lot of time and energy, and the average person just isn't going to pay for it. Chairs are really what inspired my journey to become a furniture maker over 10 years ago. The subtle detail, its humble presence, more engineered than any other piece of furniture, yet so common and often unnoticed. So I thought, fuck it, I'm going to design and make 10 chairs and release them as a new collection. This gig can be a hard slog some days. It's always been important to me that I stay inspired by what I'm creating. I like the idea of going against the grain, while other makers I knew were making bank, pumping out tables and matching them with cheap imported chairs. I thought this could be a way that I could stand out, showcase my skills, and learn more about the craft that I'm so passionate about. I sell a lot of tables, and I think it's one of those pieces that more people than not are willing to part with their money for. Generally, it's the center of your home, the place that you go to entertain when you have friends over, and the space that you connect with your family with each night. So I thought, why not turn a $10,000 dining table into a $30,000 dining set? My plan for the collection was to release one a month over a year. There was a few reasons for this. Generally, when I create a new collection, it's over a year of crafting them between projects. The time spent organizing photo shoots, as well as uploading all the content onto the website, creating media releases to send out to media contacts, etc. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and generally I release it all in one go. Maybe one magazine hits it up after sending out 20 to 50 emails, and once it's been shown in a magazine, generally the photos don't want to be used by other publications. So this way, I thought if I release one a month, I can send out a new bank of photos every 1 to 3 months to different media contacts, and hopefully, I could get a couple of features, one at the start, one in the middle, and one at the end. Another reason for this was it gave me an excuse to send out regular emails to my subscribers. Over the years, I really haven't sent too much content out because I just don't like receiving the bombardment of emails that I get from other businesses. So this way, I was able to connect with them regularly and share thoughtful and valued content. So I got sketching. The idea was to get around 100 designs down in my book, and I would pick my favorite 10 and refine them in CAD. For me, there's no real rules when it comes to sketching. I can be as rough and ready as I like, and once something strikes me or I want to explore something deeper, I will then go do a front, side, and elevation drawing and try and refine the piece more. For me, I was pretty inspired about this project, so the sketching part came easy. I hope to be able to share all the designs in this collection with you on YouTube soon, but today we're going to focus on the Mambo Chair. This piece was really a playful exploration of trying to create a chair that wasn't a chair. I did a bunch of sketches, a lot of cantilevered frames where the chair sort of floated in midair, and all of a sudden I had these kind of blocky looking images that kind of reminded me of the old school Mambo t-shirts, and I had this idea to really make this a fun and playful design by creating some real brutalist joinery and refining that with the sculpted organic form that you can see in these chairs. I played around in CAD a lot with this design, as I do with every piece that I work on. Sketching is really just the baseline, and then the design really starts to take form when I get it into CAD and can see it as a scaled piece. So what started as a simple chair design ended up being one chair in a collection of six. I refined the design idea and got six different designs that really spoke to each other in a playful way, and that was how the Mambo chairs were born. I've made this chair a bunch of times since releasing it last year, and like everything, I'm slowly starting to refine the process of how I go about making them. I've made them with no backrests, or I've made them taller to suit the dimensions of more of a traditional dining chair with a higher seat and a higher backrest. And in this video, 4 of the stools are actually being made from New Guinea rosewood with the smaller dimensions and no backs, as they're going to go into a sauna for a bathhouse down in Victoria. So now we're at the fun part where all the joinery's been cut, and these guys are pretty easy to do. You know, it's all square stock. The Dados makes easy light work out of cutting these tenons, and they're pretty fun to do as well. Mortising these out, we use the domino just because I like to use the domino for everything that I can. It's such a versatile tool. It really, you know, what can't you do with it? This one again on the Dado, this with some grooving blades. So I've got some large grooving blades, 5mm. I put 2 of them together, so I've got a 10mm cut. I actually packed them out a little bit, so it's like 10.5. So it's quite easy to, especially when I'm cutting the mortises on these with my mortise jig. I put it on and then flip them, and you can just do the 1 cut in 2 passes. A little bit of time setting it up, but once it's set up, it's pretty easy to do. So now we're here. Basically, the first time I did these ones, I glued them up in one go as all square stock, and then I went around carving them with my Arbortech and sanding them back, and that was a lot of fun, but bloody exhausting. It's a lot of work in just the sanding, a lot of work with just holding it, refining, days and days and days and days of sanding. So we're on, I think, day 3 now, machining the stock, cutting it to size, shaping it all, cutting all the tenons, shaping the insides, gluing up the seats. Probably day 3. And then I would suspect we've got another 5 days at least in shaping and sanding ahead of us, including the glue up, and then it's oiling. Oiling's not that long, but it will take, you know, over several days. So my plan this time is to, instead of gluing it all up as square stock, I'm going to shape as much as I can of this on the prior to gluing them up. So shape and finish sand to the best. You know, the finish sanding before glue up is always a bit tricky. I kind of go as much as I can to a certain extent. I will never do a fine finish sand because you're always just going to touch it up and get it dirty again. So I'll finish sand it a little bit. My plan for these is I'm going to, I mean, they're pretty fun. There's no real rule. So what I'm going to do is chuck these on the bandsaw, cut little, you know, take little chunks from it, and then I'm going to head across to the linisher. And on the end of the linisher, you'll see I'm going to shape and really tidy up that shape. Great thing about the linisher, I use the linisher so much because it's just a big belt sander. You can really get so, you know, like for flat stuff as well, I always do a lot of pre-sanding on the linisher instead of using the belt sander or an orbital because it's always going to be flat. In this case, it just makes light work out of those organic curves, as you'll see. And it's a bit of fun. So I'll get a good podcast, a good book, lock in for the next day, 2 days, I reckon, for shaping and pre-sanding before these go together. Day and a half later, here we are. You can see that organic form really taking shape on the components. Obviously, we don't go near any of the mortise and the tenons. We will shape those in once it's all been glued together. But yeah, just spending time on the components, shaping them in, rough shaping, you know, hitting them with a bandsaw, linisher. There's still a lot of work to be done. And the seats with the Arbortech, just trying to shape in the seats into just really creating that organic form, nice and soft, where the joinery components will meet. We will obviously, once it's glued up, shape these in nice and tidy. So before we get onto that, before we glue up, I'm going to again take these over and start sanding them, probably with 120 orbital. They're on the linisher we use an 80 grit, and that just helps get rid of materials and shape it. And because it's a belt sander, you don't, you know, it's quite easy, and this is oak, it's quite easy to remove those sanding marks going from 80 to 120. It's not a problem. Yeah, so another day probably on the orbital before we glue up. All right.